Okay, welcome back once again. So yes, this one we're really going to be doing something super exciting as we used to, and of course is um, switch configuration. It's a basic switch configuration, and you can see our simple instruction here. Once again, we're going to be configuring two switches. One will be named Owerri, the other will be named Port Harcourt. Will be connected over the gigabit 0 interface. This is going to be the network IP range. Okay, so that's like the overview. In our instructions, we are to do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things, which of course is configuring host names, configuring SSH. So this could be where there'd be a little bit of difficult complications where we just have to take it pretty easy, and then we'll be assigning IP address to Owerri, this IP address, and this to Port Harcourt. So we're not to talk too much. We're going to hop right into action. So to get our switches, so yes, we're going to be on the network devices under the switches subcategory, and then we just pick a switch. So we're just going to take two switches for now. Yeah, two switches, and we're taking our connector. You can pick an automatic. Of course, it's going to use the crossover by default. And yes, it's connected on the fast Ethernet port. I have no idea why these things like connecting on the fast Ethernet and not the gigabits. Like, why do you do that? But I'd rather connect via Ethernet. So gigabit Ethernet 01 to gigabit Ethernet 01. So I think we'll have to make a correction here. Here is going to be 1. And yeah, we're going to hop right into our configuration, and just as usual, on the left side is the configuration step and instruction for you to go and move with me as I go, so that yeah, you don't get stuck or don't seem to understand what I'm doing. So you could just always see what I'm doing. And we're opening our configuration terminal about immediately. So the first thing we want to do, of course, is first instruction says configuring switch names, and just like we did in the router configuration, it's pretty simple. We want to enter, well, in the user mode, we're going to switch into our privilege mode and then our configuration mode. And to configure any host name is just to type the command host name. So host name Owerri, and we hit our enter, and that's it. And one thing you notice is, see, when we were trying to play around, we see this switch. The name, this is also like the host name. It's called switch, right? And the moment we do that change, you no longer see switch but Owerri, right? This is something cool. And I also love to also rename this here to Owerri instead of having number in there. We want to do that same thing here. Config T, let's say hostname Port Harcourt. See how that goes. Okay, so there is no spacing allowed, so maybe I can do an underscore. Okay, we have Port Harcourt now. So yeah, we're done with step 1, configuring host names for both of our switches. And you really also have to note something. Switches are not necessarily routers. They don't really need much configuration, most especially since when you are having them within the network, you just want to, like, they would always do their basic stuff without you touching them, which is sending packets from the router to the PCs that needs it, and vice versa, right? Well, of course, there comes a time where you want to do a couple kind of configuration, like VLAN and all of that, trunking protocols, and we'll be looking at all of that gradually, bit by bit, right? So yeah, we're going into the next step, which is like the most exciting part of this. We have to configure SSH for both switches, and we have to set password as remote123, right? And to configure SSH, so one thing you really have to get to note and remember is there are like SSH, it's an acronym for secure shell. It's a means and a way to get to exchange data or information remotely, right? In our router, the previous lab for router we did for telnet, right? Now telnet is still a way to do that, but telnet is more like the insecure means, while secure shell more like insecure because you have to generate some cryptographic key. Yeah, and the software engineers participating in this course, of course, many of you would be conversant with SSH already. So we're going right into that. So we have to be on our configuration mode, of course, and the simple command is we have to first of all set our domain name. We have to first of all set our domain name. So yeah, once we set our domain name, it's to do that simply by saying IP domain, okay, IP domain name, we're giving KHC as our domain name. Now we've created our domain name. If you hit the question mark, you see domain name, define the default domain name. Okay, so we've created our domain name. Now we have to generate our cryptographic key, our RSA key, and to generate that, it is you see we have key. It is key. Is there any other thing? 0 is it? Okay, crypto key. We want to generate RSA, and now after this, the next thing you want to do is trying to like set the encryption level. You can choose to use 512 bits encryption or 1024 bits encryption, whichever you choose. The higher you choose, the more pretty tough the encryption will be. So I'm just going to do 512. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to type RSA and then I hit enter, and it's saying the name of the key will be owerri.khc. Choose the size of the key modulus in the range of 360 to 496. Your general purpose keys. Choosing a modulus greater than 512 may take a few minutes. Yeah. So yes, let's just use 1024. It says it may take a few minutes, and it says generating 1024 bits RSA keys will be non-exportable. So I think that's done. That's about done, right? And the next thing we want to do is, okay, you can see that now SSH enabled has been enabled, right? Next thing we want to do about now is setting the username and password. We'll say username. I think it went to set the username here. Okay, this is the name, not the username. So username, we could set the username as king, and our password could be our password is remote123, something easy for us to recall. Now we don't set in our username and password. Now the second to the last thing we have to do for the SSH is we have to set the line like we did for telnet. So line, the virtual terminal, and we are setting this for the entirety from 0 to 15. So let me do this so you understand. So we can only choose between 0 to 15. So when we do 0 15, that means we are taking the entire slot. right? And then we are transporting SSH. So transport, you have two options, input and output. We're using inputs. What input would help us do is define which protocols to use when connecting to the terminal server, right? So if you want to connect to the terminal server, define protocols to use when connecting to the terminal server. If we want to connect to our terminal server, what protocol are we using? And the input is what? SSH. That's the protocol we want to use, our SSH that was done. And then we want it to be logged in local. And yes, that's that. And we want to do the same thing for Port Harcourt. Of course, IP, domain name, KHC, crypto key generates, RSA 1024. Okay, let's give a few seconds. Few seconds. Okay, and we're giving it username, same username and password from 1 to 3. And we're setting the line same as we did for Owerri, 0 to 15, and we're setting our transport inputs as SSH, then login local. So yeah, what we done for setting up SSH on Owerri and Port Harcourt switches. So this is really how all of that steps goes. And now so yes, we've done with this. Now we've set the password. The next thing we want to do is assigning IP address to the Owerri and this IP address for the Port Harcourt, and then we'll now go into setting up the 4 gateway. So I'm going right into it. So for assigning IP address, you have to note that switches are not necessarily routers that you need to assign IP addresses to their specific interfaces, to an interface or stuff like that. So I need to exit this. So on switches, usually when you want to assign an IP address to a switch, is usually assigned to LANs, right? Like right here, we are going to like create the virtual LAN, and we're going to say interface VLAN, and you see you can pick a number between 1 to 4094. Although there are some explicit numbers you shouldn't touch that are for default certain kind of things, and as we advance in switches, we're going to touch all of that. So we can pick any number. So let's say we want to set VLAN of 150. So now you see, now we are in the interface, config interface. So we are in the VLAN means virtual LAN, so it's not a physical port, it's a virtual LAN, VLAN 150, and we are adding we are assigning an IP address. The IP address we were instructed to, mind you, we're on the Owerri. So we're asked to set up, we are asked to assign 10.41.24.2, right? And our subnet max, of course, 255.255.0, because that's what the /24 actually means, right? And a switch is usually never shut down, right? But we could still say no shutdown, but it wouldn't really make any difference because the switch is always on, right? So that's that. We want to do that same thing for Port Harcourt, and exit So we added, okay, interface VLAN 150, IP add 10.41 24. This is the IP address we're using, 24.3, 24.3. Then our subnet max 0, and yep, we're done with that. And now the next thing we are asked to do is to assign our default gateway for both switches, right? And assigning default gateway is pretty simple. All we just have to do is say IP default gateway 10.41.24.1, right? So what this simply means is, had it been, or say, let's say we had a switch, rather a router. So if we had a router here, if we had a router on this network, you know that connected here, you know that this router is going to be the one having the interface connected to that, whichever switch is going to be connected to these two, that whichever is connected to this router, that's the one that's going to have a default gateway. That's for if you need a default gateway. But for this right here, we do not really need a default gateway, right? This is just for you to really know and understand the syntax and how all this works, so that in case you need that in the future, right? So recall as setting up default gateway on switches. Again, it's IP default gateway, then 10.41.24.1, and yeah, we're done with, I think we're really done with all of the key instructions to follow. Now the next step is to check the configurations we've made, which is the show IP interface brief and the show CDP neighbors, and we're going to do that shortly. So we say show IP interface brief. Okay, remember that's something you'd have to do only from the what do they call that again? You'll be able to do that only from the only from the privilege mode. So if you don't, so we can do X. Now when we've exited into the privilege mode, so we are running what do we want to show? So show IP interface brief. Show IP interface brief, and you can see this is really all the interfaces on the switch, from the fast Ethernet 1, and you can see that it's unassigned, down to fast Ethernet 24 is unassigned, yes, manual, and it is down. It is okay, the method is manual, and its status is down. It is down. There's nothing connected to it, right? And the same thing for all of them, right? And the same thing for the gigabits. There are just 2 gigabits interfaces, right? And we see that the 01 is up because this was the interface which that connection was done, and there's no IP address aside on that interface. And you see by default VLAN 1 is usually always activated, and it's like you see, it's usually for administrative purposes, right? So it is administratively down, right? We'll get into that surely in future consequences. And here is the VLAN which we created, VLAN 50, and this is the IP address we assigned to it, right? And the next command we want to show is show CDP neighbors. So what this is going to do is going to show us the neighbor switch connected to this, right? All its data, and as you can see, this kind of like brings that up, right? You can see here. So R is for router, T is for transbridge, and all of that. So you can see that the device ID we're connected to, the device we're connected to is Port Harcourt. That is the neighbor of the Owerri, right? It is Port Harcourt, and it's connected to Port Harcourt via the gigabit 01 port. And yes, you can see all the information here, and that is the same thing. If we come to the Port Harcourt and we say show CDP neighbors, oh, show CDP neighbors, you see we're seeing the Owerri here, right? And if we say show IP interface brief, you can see our Villa 150 here, which we created. So yes, thank you so much for this one, guys. I do hope you really did learn a couple cool stuff. So we'll be doing we'll be talking, the next video will be where we're talking on ports and VLAN proper on our switching. So see you on the next one. Bye.